Welcome back to another episode of the Downsizing Roadmap podcast with your hosts, Jody Roscoe and Heather Fisher. We're talking about all things downsizing, from our own experiences with clients to guest experts. Let's make downsizing easier, one conversation at a time. Hey everyone, we are here today with Ann Taylor from M&M Title, and we're super excited to talk to her. There are all kinds of things like you don't know what you don't know. And so as we have run into all kinds of things during our house, selling houses, we just wanted to have Ann come on and talk about things you should look out for and things you don't even know you should be concerned about.
Right?
Right? Because how the property is titled matters and all of those things. So let's kind of just talk about that today. Thank you for coming here with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. Always fun to be with you, lovely ladies.
So excited.
Yes, lots of considerations. And it's, I think of it in the context of someone who might be listening and what is not so complicated or complex, because honestly, that's why you work with professionals.
Right.
You work with professionals who can know the things you don't know, but what can you do as a person who owns or is purchasing property to really be prepared on your own right? Because if I'm going to sell my house, for example, I don't want to call you all to list it the very next day before I've even considered what needs to be done to get it ready. Pretty much the same thing on the title side. You don't want to be thinking of these things last second, but often, and unfortunately, most people don't give them any thought. And so the issues that impact selling someone's property or that impact purchasing property don't come up until they're thick into the transaction and the timelines and they're feeling really rushed. So glad for the opportunity, want people to be able to think in advance about what they might need to do.
I think that's a huge value you can bring is the questions we don't even know to ask, point us in that direction for what we should be looking for and what we should be preparing for as we get ready.
Because really that's what we talk about on this podcast a lot is just being ready, like just knowing things and being ready. And a lot of these people bought their houses a really long time ago. Mm-hmm. And so they don't even know how their property's titled. And we have gotten to the place where as soon as we talk to somebody, we have time to look at it. We have you guys, we do.
Yes.
We need you to look at this and make sure it's okay.
Yes.
But we had somebody who, we can talk about survivorship or not, but they didn't have that. And so if somebody passes away, talk about that a little bit.
Right. So the first thing you really want to do is look at your deed. Who's in title? Who owns this
What
property?
if they don't know where the deed is?
And so that's a very common thing because unlike a car title, people think, oh, well, when I pay off my house, I'll get my title, my deed. That's how it works with a car in Ohio. That's not how it works with real property. And I should importantly clarify that I'm speaking with regard to Ohio.
Yeah,
many states
are in Ohio.
Yeah, many states are the same, but specifically I'm talking about Ohio. And so when you if you don't have your deed, if you didn't put that away in that file cabinet that you know just where to go get it, or now maybe an electronic file, then you can contact a title company and we will look that up. So we are often doing that for our real estate clients, the realtors who are helping their clients through, or the consumer may call us directly. We'll pull your deed, and the first thing we're going to see is who are you in title with? Maybe it is you and your spouse, and you say, oh my gosh, we're not married anymore. We got divorced. We are separated. My spouse has passed away. Any number of circumstances. And then we want to look at what is most important then with regard to that circumstance. Because if it's me and my spouse, for example, and we're still both here ready and able and willing to sell, great. But if my spouse has passed away, then do I have a survivorship deed? And talking about people who may have bought their property many years and in fact decades ago, it was really the early 70s when in Ohio survivorship language was even put into law. So if they took title and never had sort of an estate planning or deed title checkup along the way, if their spouse has passed, they may need to pass their deceased spouse's interest through probate. Alternatively, if they held the property as trustee of a trust, maybe there's a successor trustee that needs to step into the shoes of the person who has passed away. So those are the important things to start with. And it's not just someone who may have passed away. Maybe they have a physical or cognitive disability now that they didn't previously have. And so it's the time to look into, do power of attorney documents exist? Or if they're on the front end of perhaps a cognitive decline where they still have many good days that they very much understand what they're doing, is it a good time to start thinking about being ready and having a power of attorney document prepared in advance? At some point, if they're not able to sign you, it may be too late.
So we have had that scenario. So definitely, you guys, here's what I'm going to say: get a power of attorney early, because you don't have to use it if you don't need it. But if something happens and they are no longer able to sign, or if somebody starts to have some kind of dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that, and that gets diagnosed, then they're not allowed to sign it, and so then you're in a real pickle.
And keep those originals,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, keep those originals or record it. A lot of times the power of attorney documents really don't contain too much very private information. So one of the reasons you record documents is so that they're forever memorialized. If you lose the original, it's already out there. Mm-hmm. But you do need an original in the state of Ohio for recording purposes. And I'm glad you said that with everybody this is not something, wait till you have health issues, wait until you
Don't wait.
Everybody's life is uncertain from moment to moment, and we hope that if there is some kind of health ailment, that maybe it's temporary. Or maybe, and I don't want to just talk about the difficult times of life, maybe you're on a world cruise. Maybe you're on a mission trip somewhere that's remote and it's impractical for you to sign. And so it's nice to have everything in place so that this trip you've been planning for 2 years and just happens to now perfectly coincide with the very moment that your house goes under contract. And that's Murphy's Law, right?
Of course.
It's nice to know that someone back here, your adult son, daughter, friend, can handle your affairs for you. And none of us know from moment to moment or day to day. So it's a great document to have in place, always to be prepared for the uncertain.
Yeah, I think that's something that everybody should have, no matter what, just because you don't know what's going to happen. And like sometimes it is good things, but sometimes it's not good things. And it might not be permanent, and might not be forever that you can't sign. But
Right.
if you have some time where you have to go to the hospital or do something, you need to have somebody to be able to handle things for you.
Yes, I mean, unfortunately, I've done this for over 30 years now, and tens of thousands of closings, and every circumstance you can imagine. And there are times when someone's had a surgery, and they're going to come through it just fine, but in that moment, they're on pretty serious pain medication or other medication. It's not the time for them to be clear-headed and thinking about documents that they're going to be signing.
Yeah.
And so under a medical supervision, they have to be weaned off of that so that they can sign documents. And that's a very unfortunate circumstance, because that's the last thing they want to do, is to have their medications impacted by documents they have to sign for a
Right.
closing, right?
Ours, back to Murphy's Law, so we were refinancing our house one time, and of course Mark was out of town, and so I did have that power of attorney, but man, did I get a hand cramp, because I had to sign my name and his name and all the words.
Yes, by so-and-so.
And I was like, why is he not here? But it's okay, it was good, because I had the
It
document.
could
and
just
he
be
didn't.
handled
Yeah.
and not delayed. Yeah.
Military folks, a lot
Yeah.
of times, they've got a spouse, or people who travel on business often, they've got a spouse that unexpectedly has been called out of town or has been deployed, and they need to be able to be nimble and be able to still deal with all their transactions. Important to know what kind of power of attorney. We also, having attorneys on staff at our company, we often review these documents for other people so that they know they've got the right power of attorney
Yeah.
document, not a healthcare power of attorney when you're talking about real estate and personal financial matters. And so you want to have the right power of attorney for the right circumstance.
Right. So when we get somebody and they say they have a power of attorney, right away, same thing. We send it to you, and we make sure that it is the power of attorney that does cover real estate, because there are different ones. And so you do have to make sure it's, like you said, it's not the healthcare power of attorney or whatnot.
I think
go ahead.
I think with so many situations, it's not that, us as the consumer need to know all of these hurdles that could be in the paperwork or exactly everything. We just need to keep remembering, do it early and have ask the questions and, be prepared with the documents and get them checked early, because this last minute, day of closing is not the time to be asking, is this all in line with who can sign and who's here? So
Yeah.
Right. And important to keep in mind, too. I mean, we deal with this when someone has passed away, and maybe I'm the, mom or dad aren't married or their spouse has already passed on, and it's now I'm inheriting the property. And I know that because they've shared certain documents with me or information with me, but that doesn't happen automatically. There are still maybe legal processes to go through. It depends, and it really is a smart time before the property goes on the market, before you're ready to say, okay, today's the day, to in advance have those things looked at so that we can say, well, there was already a transfer on death designation affidavit, so you don't have to go through probate. Or again, between spouses or partners, that you had a survivorship deed where it automatically passed to you without a probate process. But in many circumstances, you're still going to need to rely on the probate courts and their processes to put into effect what that person's wishes were, so that then, yes, you can go on to either inherit or their executor sell the property.
And that power of attorney, correct me if I'm wrong, but that ends when the person passes. So
Which I think a lot of people don't know.
A lot of people don't know that. I'm so glad you mentioned that,
Yeah.
because a power of attorney is good as long as the person is living, and it needs to have certain language in it, durability language, if that person is no longer cognitively able to act on their own behalf, and it needs to not have any kind of time deadlines if it was executed many years ago, so that it would have expired. So there's a lot of moving parts, and to your point, Heather, you shouldn't have to try to memorize all
Right.
of these.
Yeah.
But know you have resources and know that it matters, and reach out to a real estate professional or title company that can help you through this.
Yeah. I think the big thing to know is you should have one. And if somebody passes away, then that's not the path anymore that you can use it. So there are other paths, but that's not the path.
Right. And we see a lot of times where, there's that, again, I'm talking about adult children, not minors, that child who's done everything for their parent in the last years or months of their life. And they were the designated power of attorney, and then mom or dad will pass, and they don't realize that mom and dad, in an effort to be fair, made this one, child A, the power of attorney, but child B is the executor of the estate. And maybe a different one, if they had a trust, was the trustee of the trust, and that was their sense of equity, and we didn't want to show favoritism. But not everybody necessarily fills all of those roles, and they are roles that are specific authorities under those specific documents. So which one's now relevant? If they're living, it may be the power of attorney, but otherwise it may be an executor.
Yeah. We have a survivorship story. So it was a property that had been, I'm sure that they had owned it before the 70s. And mom and dad had both been moved into assisted living, and dad wasn't doing well. And so when we sent the title to have it looked at, it was not a survivorship deed. And so dad was really not doing well. So if dad had passed away without that change, then it would have had to go to probate, right? And which they would have eventually been able to sell the house, but not when they needed to sell the house right away to get the money to take care of mom. Mm-hmm. And so the title company just whipped up one of those deeds and changed it, so they got that all signed. Unfortunately, dad passed away, but they were just so grateful. They didn't know that's how it was titled, and they didn't know that they needed to change it. And if we hadn't, been there in that time frame, we wouldn't have been able to fix it for them.
Yes, and that's why it is so important, best case scenario, to not wait till there's a sort of imminent health situation. But if there is, it's even more important that if they're still able to sign for a period of time, that you try to address these things while they've still got that physical and mental ability. And physical ability doesn't have to be much. You don't need to be,
It has to be a perfect signature.
It doesn't have to. If you've seen my handwriting, nothing ever has to be a perfect signature. But just that they can know what they're signing on their own behalf.
Yeah.
And then, sometimes we see it too, where this is the last surviving parent, and it's not about survivorship between spouses, but what if that parent would pass away before the transaction would complete? Do they have a transfer on death designation affidavit already of record? Because if they want it to go to their children outside of probate, that's a good mechanism that can be considered for transferring outside of probate. But again, there's a different urgency there, because unlike other types of documents that are effective the moment that they're properly executed, a transfer on death designation affidavit has to also be recorded. And so it's an extra step that has to occur. It's not just, hey, we got there just in time to sign and they had hours to go. But no, you've got to get this to the recorder as well.
So tell me the difference between a survivorship deed and a transfer on death. So how do those work differently?
Okay. And in a survivorship deed, two people currently are vested in title, own property together. And then the way that it's written with the survivorship clause is sort of a last man or woman standing. So between my spouse and I, or sometimes I'll see, three people entitled together, and if one of them would pass, whoever is the survivor then owns that person's proportionate share. So if it's me and my spouse, they pass, I now own my spouse's share. And if it's two of us, or three of us, then the remaining two will own that other person's one-third
like they would split it or whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
Whereas a transfer, and there's considerations. Back in the day, and again, all these things are a function of statute in the state of Ohio, so they aren't just automatic. You have to follow the statute and the statutory requirements. And back in the day, transfer on death wasn't even available. So I always say it's this new mechanism, which now I look back and we're probably 20 years into it, right?
Yeah.
I'm at that age, or like
Me
just
too.
the
I'm
other
like,
day.
that was just yesterday, right? No, that was
I've been doing
12
this
years
too
ago.
long, Anne.
Yes. And so a transfer on death says, I don't want to immediately vest you in ownership, because maybe you're my adult child and I don't want you to have ownership, because we're also a dower state that if I put you in ownership, adult child or children with me, now I've got to worry about your spouses having to sign off if I just want to refinance. Or we've had circumstances where parents did that thinking it was a good idea, and then their adult children say, I don't want you to move to Florida. I don't want you to sell your house. I'm not going to sign off on that. So I still can act autonomously if I remain in title, or it's even me and my spouse. But if we want to designate our children, very common, doesn't have to be your children, but if we want to designate someone else to be our beneficiary after we pass, and we want that to stay outside of probate, then that's a document we put on the record to say, okay, if we pass, or I pass, if it's just one person, then who does my property go to at that point? But before that, I've got full control of my property for refinance, for sale. I can change my mind and file a new affidavit and designate different people if some circumstance changes.
I think that's a big comfort level to people, that don't want to give all of their independence and decision-making power. They want to be prepared, but they don't want to take away their own ability to make their decisions, financial decisions and big decisions. So it's good to know there's that other option where it's waiting.
Yes.
We had one where, though, he left it to his 5 kids, and then their spouses, so 10 people had to sign on.
There's not room on the contracts.
It's not. No, get a separate addendum. It's those things happen.
I know.
And it is frustrating. There's different. In all of this too. It can get into some pretty complicated situations, and it's a great thing to go discuss with your family estate planning attorney, talk through all of the considerations. You may be at a point where it's smart to put the property into a trust, and then you've got one acting trustee on behalf of your 5 children, and
right.
So you don't have all of those. So there's so many factors to consider that it really is not the thing to do just in the last second before you're ready to sell.
Right. Yeah, no, I think this is absolutely one of those things where people buy the house and they never look at the paperwork again, ever.
So since we're talking about deeds, can we talk a little bit about deed fraud? It seems like that is a hot topic these days.
That is a hot topic. So we're in Montgomery County, Ohio right now, and I know Montgomery County, like many prosecutors' offices, has set up a special deed fraud task force. That's to show you just how prevalent this scam and these scams are. I think we get a lot of phone calls. People have seen the products online or on television, like Title Lock, and those products all, have different features to them. I'm a big fan of, number one, most counties, you can register to be notified by the county if anything on your property records. Now, that doesn't stop fraud from happening, but it sure does give you immediate notice when it happens, which lets you take quick action. But there are also insurance products that can be purchased, title insurance products, to help protect against it. But deed fraud is basically the circumstance where either somebody else owns the property and I'm the fraudster and I decide that I would like to pretend to be you. And so, and if I'm a fraudster, I might be sophisticated enough to know how to trick the system. It's one thing if I can find a buyer ultimately that doesn't even use a title company or use real estate professionals to cross all the T's and dot all the I's. But even if they are, and I'm sophisticated enough, I may have devised schemes where I can make it look like I'm the owner of your property and entitled to sell your property. Or you remain in ownership. And this is something that impacts seniors a little bit more than other people, because very often, having had many years to pay off debt, pay down debt, they have a tremendous amount of equity in their home. And so if I am clever and I can impersonate somebody, I might be able to take a mortgage on their home that looks like I am rightfully entitled to do that. And now they go to sell, not thinking they have any mortgages. The title company goes and searches title and says, excuse me, there's a big fat mortgage. Now, there are things to be done. It's nice if you have a title insurance product that also protects you, but it's not something that you want to be then surprised with at that very moment that you already think you're under contract to sell. Yeah.
So we sell title insurance often when we sell the property now, and you can talk to us a little bit about what title insurance is and why you should have it. But just in that one right there, just my quick thought process was like, what if they have bought the house 40 years ago? It was title insurance something at that time, and would it still be in be able to be used? Or, talk to me a little bit about, and then you can also just say what it is.
Okay. Yeah. We'll cover it all. All right, I'll do my best. So title insurance, it is unlike other types of insurance. When you buy it, it is a one-time premium, one-time purchase, and it is good for as long as you own the property or your heirs own the property. So if I bought it 40 years ago and I have title insurance, and then I pass it along to my children and they own it for 5 more years or however many more years, it still remains good during their ownership period as well.
Does it have to be purchased when you buy the property, or can it be purchased later on?
That's a great question. So that's the most common time that someone would consider to buy it. And you can get special discounts, again, in Ohio for the pricing if you're also financing and paying for a lender's policy of title insurance. Very much want to distinguish that we're talking about an owner's policy that protects the property owner, not the policy that the lender may require, the bank may require for you to buy for them. That does nothing for you. That's insurance for them if they ever end up owning the property because they've had to foreclose. So it does not do anything for the property owner. So an owner's policy, they typically will buy when they first purchase the property. But if you didn't, if you say, wow, there's too much going on, we were tight on money, we didn't know, we just needed a breather, or you're just revisiting it now because you weren't educated at the time, you can buy that at any time. You may have extra costs because a title search is essential in order for us to issue the policy and certain things, but whereas that's already happening when you're purchasing, but you can do that at any time to buy a standard policy of title insurance.
So with that title insurance, then if somebody did try to did some kind of deed fraud, would that cover it, or is that a separate product? Or talk to me about that.
Right. So there's 2 types of policies that you can get for owner's policies. You can get the standard policy, and the standard policy goes into effect from the point of issuance, which again, since it's usually at the time you've purchased the property, when that deed goes on record, putting me in title. It's for anything that would have happened or arisen prior to that date that later comes back to haunt me. So I bought the property today and I think that I'm dealing with the rightful owners, but all of a sudden an unknown spouse shows up, or we realize that there was an error on the public record and you couldn't see the mortgage that was there, but now a mortgage holder is coming forward and going, sorry, the county messed up the recording reference, but we do have a lien on this property that didn't get paid. So anything that might come back that related to a time before I took title is going to be covered by a standard policy of title insurance, and that includes fraud from a prior owner, somebody in the chain of title, maybe my seller, maybe someone before them, maybe another party out there. Whereas an enhanced policy, and officially these are called homeowners policies, not to be confused, and I don't like that name because that's the filed name in Ohio, but not to be confused with your homeowners insurance that protects you against fire hazard and things like that. But this is an enhanced policy of title insurance that then also gives you future protections. So it's the one type of title insurance that gives you future protections against somebody down the road that might try to fraudulently put a mortgage on your property, fraudulently convey your property. And sadly, I alone, one title person, attorney at one company in one town or geographic area of our state has had multiple occasions where that has occurred to clients, and it's really very upsetting. It usually is not revealed until they're engaged in a transaction to sell. And so that's why it's free online to register through your county recorders to get notification if something happens. But more importantly, you really do want to have an enhanced policy of title insurance to protect you in the future. Again, the best time to get that is when you're purchasing, but you can go back and purchase that at any time.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of people that might own their house free and clear. Like you said, so much equity, so they wouldn't have a mortgage that had made them do that or any of those things, so that maybe they do need to just kind of take a look at that. Is that also a one-time fee then?
That is. It's a one-time fee. And if you had a standard policy, unfortunately, you can't just upgrade it to become an enhanced. The base product is entirely different. And the enhanced policy, too, I'll say, gives you 19 additional protections, not just the fraud protection, some inflationary protections, because your policy of title insurance, when you talk about buying something 40, 50 years ago, you may have purchased it at a very different price point, hopefully, than it is now worth. And so some of those inflationary coverages are helpful. It can protect you against other encroachments that happen down the road that didn't exist already, a neighbor who built a fence on your property or a shed on your property. So there's a lot of additional coverages, but the number one reason we're seeing people purchase it, the reason it's become standard in certain markets in Ohio, mostly central and northeast, is that it is the fraud that's occurring at an alarming rate. And so it's really a good thing to, just like you do any other kind of insurance checkup or estate planning checkups, to do your title checkup and say, what makes sense for me now?
Yeah. I think, go ahead.
I registered on the county for our property, and it's easy to do. I mean, step one, if you're looking for the easiest step you could take right away, I think there's several in our area, several of the counties that have that service that you can just go on the county website and register. I think I registered our address and names, and have gotten an email with someone with a similar name. Just it's like, okay, I've looked into this. It's not me, all good, but it is that peace of mind to know that works.
When we sell title insurance, we don't really sell it. We give them the option for it, and you guys talk to them about what it is. But the biggest number one question is, do I need it? And my answer is, it's insurance, right? I mean, do you need car insurance? Do you need, home insurance? Likely it's not going to be something that is going to happen.
You don't need it until you need
but
it.
If you need it, the cost to unravel that, if something major happens, with the title is much more than the one-time cost of paying for that.
Right. Well, and the most important thing to know about title insurance, too, is that it's not just that somebody comes forward with a valid interest, a valid claim, a valid interest that maybe should be paid or it needs to be fought because it's not a valid interest, or there's some factual uncertainty there that needs to be litigated. Title insurance policy has a duty to defend the insured. So if you are my insured under that owner's policy, you're going to have the legal services of the title insurance underwriter defending your ownership rights. And if a claim is held to be valid up to the value of the policy, they're going to also pay that. But there's no cap on the cost of those legal fees. I've got a situation right now where someone, the prior lender failed to release their mortgage. They later claimed to be owed more than their payoff letter first stated. They filed foreclosure against the new owner.
Oh my gosh.
And their mortgage company, and the amount of the additional funds they were claiming was just over $13,000. Now that's not pocket change. That's a lot of money. But the legal fees to fight it and to litigate it have been tens of thousands of dollars. So while it's eventually settled out and they reached resolution, that wasn't until tens of thousands of dollars had been spent on legal fees. And fortunately, our customer was covered by a policy of title insurance. So none of that was out of their pocket. They bought their title insurance up front. So like you're saying, I mean, title insurance is like any insurance. If you never need it, you look back and say, in hindsight, darn it,
yeah,
I didn't need to spend that. And if you do, it's worth its weight in gold, pretty much the moment that you need it.
And the peace of mind of knowing you have it.
Yeah, so we're always like, if you have that cash, you should just
Yes.
Yeah.
protect yourself. Okay, so what else? What else do we need to talk about?
Well, so a lot of times, I know you all are working with folks who are downsizing, and sometimes that means they're not going to repurchase, but for a lot of them, they are going to repurchase, just something that's more right-sized for them, And so as a purchaser, some of these considerations are the same. So, if I'm a current property owner, I want to look at how do I hold title? Does it still make sense? Do I need to make changes? Do I have a policy of title insurance? Am I now worried about fraud or other matters that it makes sense for me to have an enhanced policy that I want to switch out? But as a buyer, in sort of a different orientation, you're considering a lot of these same things now on the front end. I'm going into title and buying in the first place. How do I want to go in title? Is it right for me to have survivorship? Is it right for me to put this in a trust? Some of my considerations might be, do I want my spouse to have an interest in the property? And if the reason that you're relocating is because you've gone through a separation and you're not yet divorced, in Ohio, that might impact your decision, because if you are going to finance that new purchase, your spouse has to sign off on that mortgage, even though they may not be going in title ownership and they may not be borrowing any money under the loan. They would have to consent under our laws. And so that might change how you want to go into ownership, because you don't want to have that spouse to have to sign off on things. So these are things to talk about with a title attorney or an estate planning attorney in advance as you're considering purchasing. And a lot of it is estate planning, to say, well, right now it's me and my spouse still, or just myself, and I'm good, but down the road, what do I want to have happen? And maybe that's the time you decide to put a transfer on death designation affidavit on, to leave it behind to your whoever you were going to leave it to, your children or your other heirs that you want to bequeath that property to if you still own it.
Yeah, there's a lot of relationship dynamics with second marriages and stepchildren and children and all of that, to just make sure everything is lined up the way you want it to be.
Right, because, and the second marriage is a great example, because maybe we come together and said, well, let's not commingle everything. We share our lives together, but we know that our kids and grandchildren, they may not want to be equally intertwined, and so I'm going to put half of my ownership interest into a trust for the benefit of my heirs and you for yours, or some other mechanism that really makes sense. And so all of these things are the things to talk about on the front end, so that what ends up happening is what you intended, and you've made those decisions with a lot of forethought and a lot of planning knowing that you can change them. Very few of these things can't be changed. I see sometimes people get stagnated by the sense of permanency of a decision, and so they make no decision because they don't want to make the wrong, I don't want to make a wrong decision, so I just won't do anything. I won't decide on it. No, make the best decision for now, and if something changes, you can always go back and look at it then and change it appropriately then.
Yeah. I think the key though is to have something that you want to have happen in place, because I think sometimes they just, as you said, they don't think about it, or they don't want to think about it. They don't want to think about what might happen when, but then that leaves their adult kids to figure it out for themselves, and that is ugly sometimes.
It's ugly, and that's why too. I mean, people do things with the best of intentions, right? And I, as an attorney, will advise people. I know this is your goal, but the way you're thinking about doing it maybe isn't the best route for you. And here's an alternative, because again, it's really important to recognize the spousal dynamic. Because I have people say, "My kids get along; it won't be a problem." First of all, that's sometimes a very different situation where now somebody's passed or about to pass, and money's on the table. And those adult children will consider the interests of their spouses and their points of view and what they want. But what has happened where I'll see someone say, well, I just want my son or daughter or both to be entitled with me, and they don't realize that even though my adult children may always defer to what I want, I can't do anything without now also their spouses signing off because of the dower interest if I put them in title. Or I may not realize that, most families have that one that's maybe not quite so financially responsible, and that's the one I really want to leave stuff to because they're going to need it the most. But now, unfortunately, if I put them in title with me under rights of survivorship, and they rack up credit card bills they don't pay or income taxes they don't pay, and those entities, either the government or a credit card holder, file a lien against them, that now attaches to my property too. Yeah. So these things are really important to think about and say, boy, what do I really want to have happen? And what is the dynamic? Because if you know they don't get along, you might want to put it in trust for them with somebody else as trustee. So it can still benefit them, but they don't have to make it a point of contention between the two of them or more.
What should they think about if they want to loan their kids money?
And we're seeing this at a very high rate in these last several years. The market has been hot in most places, and it can be very competitive for especially a first-time home buyer who doesn't have a lot of financial resources. They can say, I'm getting beat out. I never can get that contract together because I'm getting beat out by all these cash buyers. And so those, they get together with their parents, and if their parents have the financial means to do it, they may say, you write that as a cash offer. I'm going to loan you the money to buy it. So this is a private thing that we've got going on. And then once you own the property and you win the bid and you go forward with this purchase, hopefully, then we can work out how you're going to pay me off. You may go then and get traditional financing. Structuring that and thinking about that is really, really important because couple things. You want to think about, is this a long-term arrangement or a short-term arrangement? Am I planning to be your lender for the next 30 years? Because depending on my age or any number of circumstances, 30 years is an awful lot of time, but I may not even think I might be here in 30 more years. Mm-hmm. And so what's going to happen? How does that mortgage get resolved or released when I will pass away, if it's still going to be in place? Or is this intended to be a really short-term solution because you're immediately qualified and able to go out and get other financing on your own? This is just a competitive advantage for you to get the property in the first place. But then how you structure it matters and can impact your child's ability to get that better mortgage financing. I just had a situation last week where the parents loaned the money, and they had a high level of trust. Trust is a matter of a lot of factors, even outside of someone's integrity, right? Life happens, unexpected things happen, but they trusted that the kids would go out and refinance it really quickly, and they didn't put a mortgage on the property. They didn't sign a note and put a mortgage, because they said, I don't want to have to, I'm never going to foreclose on my kids. Right. I'm not going to make them do that, and they're going to do it. And the kids had every intention, and in fact, they did go forward to do that. But they got a worse interest rate and costs on their new loan because it was called a cash-out refi. They already owned the property, and they basically were taking all the money out. And even though they were going to pay off what was effectively a loan, on paper and on record, it didn't look like that.
Looked like they were just taking the money and giving it to their parents.
Yeah, it looked like they were just taking it to do whatever they wanted to do with it.
Yeah,
And the fact that they were going to make right by their parents is good for them, but it cost them a little bit more than it had to, than if they would have structured it a little different and left the note and mortgage in place to effectuate the same exact thing, and now it benefits them under their new loan for a much longer period of time.
I think that's the thing, is it's a business agreement, basically. And because it's family, people don't, they think, oh, it's going to be fine. But really just make it be that business agreement and do the things. And of course, they're going to do the right thing and everybody's going to do the right thing. But if you file it and make sure that it's all exactly written out so everybody knows what's happening.
Yes, it's more important in my view to have everything in writing and clearly determined between friends and family than, we do that as a matter of course between people we don't know.
Right.
I don't know you to trust you. We're just going to make it perfectly clear. But when you're operating off of a lot of trust, two honest people can interpret the information and the understandings very different in their own minds. So when you reduce that to a document that you both sign and now you have a chance to look at it and does it say what I thought was going to happen, then that's your opportunity to refine it to say, okay, now we're on the same page.
Right.
I think too, having an expert resource, the title company or another financial person or attorney that you can, before you've executed on these decisions, talk through to them what your intention is. And you've already said so many nuanced hurdles that can come up today in your advice, and I feel like that's the big takeaway, is that as a family, decide on what that course of action is, but then go describe it to an expert of, in whichever category, to get it on paper and make sure it is executing what you want and not, oh, well, we thought this is what we were doing, because those little nuances and differences in paperwork or how things are worded can cause obstacles. So as always, be prepared and bring in the experts when it's not, your area of expertise.
So I think that's the theme of today, right? Just make sure that somebody takes a look at it every once in a while, that it's, have a conversation with your family, make sure that it is how it is you want it to be, and then make sure it actually is the way that you want it to be.
Right, and that's a smart thing. And sometimes it's more than one professional, because as an attorney, I'll say, run this by your tax advisor, because this is what I'm telling you makes sense legally, but now one solution may have different tax implications over another, and so you want to make sure all of that is in line and you don't have unintended consequences. And so just to have that advanced thinking, whether you're buying, selling, or just going to hold your property for a while, and this is down the road, just to make sure everything that is existing or that you're setting up is exactly how you intend it to be, and if not, how do you prepare to arrange it so that's all set for when you are ready to take action.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
We really appreciate this information. If y'all have questions, please reach out. We're happy to get answers to them. And
awesome. We had a great conversation. We appreciate your advice, Anne, and stay tuned. Next week's episode is on getting your home ready to sell for a downsizing move. So we're excited, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Downsizing Roadmap podcast. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who might need a little downsizing inspiration. Have questions or ideas for future episodes? Reach out to us on our website, www.downsizingroadmap.com. Until next time, let's keep simplifying and moving forward.